Hey, there we go.
There we are.
Welcome back, everybody. Ashram Hours. First of the year for you, second for me.
Oh, yes.
I didn't see you last week. You've been in the cave, just coding. Well, in the kitchen. I like to refer to it as a kitchen. Have you
It feels
slept?
like a cave. Just me and my servers.
Have you slept?
A little bit.
I think
A
I'm gonna
little.
get you.
That's the problem when you don't you're in flow state. Once you break the seal and take a nap, then your body's like, more of that, please.
Yeah, yeah. I feel that. I've had sessions like that, not really at the dev level though. I imagine. I think I spoke to you on, was it Monday? Yeah, Monday you were coming through like a 40-hour no sleep coding binge. And I remember you came up for air and you're like, I don't think we're going to be ready to launch today. And I was like, great news. We're launching tomorrow. And you're just like, yes. That was a good
Yeah.
moment. I thought that is so typical of pre-launch, no sleep, no rest for the weary. So shout out to you. I just got to give you a round of applause, everyone watching. A man behind the math, and you've just been absolutely on it for 2 weeks and a really smooth launch yesterday. So congrats to that, sir.
It was smooth. Yeah. Just happy that it worked out. Here we are, day one.
Yeah,
New paradigm.
that's it. Yeah, it feels kind of surreal. I was a little stunned yesterday in and through it, and people were texting me just like, dude, like how'd it go? Congrats. Like, yeah. Like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I feel stunned, like it's just whoa. And then last night when we chatted, it was kind of like, okay, it feels real now. It's like the dust has settled, it's humming. And forever now, Samsara is just alive. No more when about it. It's just like here it is, and it's trading and it's live. It feels good. And finally, my job gets a lot more fun now, a lot more accessible because I can talk to people and be like, look, here's this thing. It's real. It's not like this vague idea that's coming soon. This, been promoting the DevNet for months, and this just hits different. So
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be
And it
happier
really
with
is forevermore.
the launch. Yeah, and now it's just new assets each week until further notice, and community buzzing and growing, and there's just a lot more to do. And we've seen crazy flows. In fact, one of the things I want to show today, somebody pointed out, they said, we've never seen this before. The prana deposited back on the Nirvana app just like nosedived because everybody pulled it to move over to Samsara. I don't think everyone had that on their calendar for like, I should do that. But as it turns out, those who did absolutely printed yesterday. I was getting screenshots from people saying like, oh, I just made $7,000 of soul and rewards. Like, even myself sitting with you getting ready for launch, I didn't move my prana over in its entirety. I moved a little over like 10 minutes in. So yeah, it was wild. It's going to just widen the horizons for prana immensely.
The whole idea of crypto was, hey, let's cut out the middleman. Initially, it was because the middleman can sometimes be fraudulent or have their own ad hoc reasons for why they do things. But another side effect of cutting out the middleman is there's more money on the table. You don't have to pay the middleman to do things. Exchanges typically have a rock they got to roll up the hill, which is where does the liquidity come from? They have to pay off market makers, liquidity providers, et cetera, et cetera. Insurance funds are what leverage exchanges have to have because occasionally they'll go bankrupt, have bad debt. Maybe they didn't margin call in time, and so they need to keep money around for that in order to cover their losses. Samsara doesn't have any of those problems. It's an exchange, a derivatives exchange, but it has no market makers that it needs to pay off or incentivize is another word for that. And it has no possibility for bad debt, which would require insurance and licensing, et cetera, et cetera. But as an exchange, it makes money on volume. When you don't have the middlemen that you need to pay off, it turns out that's a staggering amount of money in the cases of most exchanges. And so when you just pay it forward to the token holders, it can add up very quickly.
Yeah,
I think the
I mean,
reason that's so unusual is, I mean, it's not unusual for an exchange to make money. It's unusual for an exchange to be in a position to just give it back.
yeah. Well, and that's really the key piece here that I think will proliferate across the interwebs is that when you hold a NAV token, it's valued in the underlying token. In the case of NavSol, and we could pull up the screen share now, why not? In the case of NavSol, it is valued against Solana. And that Solana that it's backed by is the Solana that all the holders deposited. And so they are the liquidity providers. They are the lenders, and they should get paid for that. And rather than including some different kind of yield, rev share, whatever, the idea is that payment goes directly into the NAV, directly into this floor region. And as it rises, which it's doing now by 0.5% compounding every 10 minutes, and it'll continue to do that probably, assuming there's not a big onslaught exodus here, it'll probably end up around 6x in the next 2 days. And that means increased credit capacity. So everybody holding these NAV SOL tokens can borrow a little more SOL against their position as this red line drives higher. And so, as you pointed out, there's no need to incentivize external market makers, liquidity providers, lenders, because that's everybody. That's everybody who's participating in this market. And if you see value behind a NAV token, it's real value. And that's my favorite part, because I'm really tired. I'm tired, boss, of all of these tokens that have hidden supply. It's just been the paradigm for a long time, and it worked for a little while. When it's up, it's up. It's not such a big deal. People like it. But what we've seen continuously and persistently in crypto is that vesting schedules, emission schedules, all these kinds of things, they will hit, and that will skew the supply and demand for the worse. And it's very hard for tokens to overcome that. And I think people were pretty aware of like this low float, high FDV scams, as they called it, kind of around post or pre FTX collapse era. There's a lot of these, I think Serum is probably my favorite. I think it was 85 billion FDV, but like a 10% float. It doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. Like that value wasn't real, and it got extracted and eliminated. So I think my favorite part of telling this story is that when you see an AVA, assured value asset like ANA or NAV tokens, soon Launchpad tokens, when you see value there, it is real. And that is nice. It's a nice shift. It may be less in some cases, it may be more, but whatever it is exactly what it is. There's no hiding. There's no hidden supply anywhere.
The ironclad, the gold, let's not say iron, more precious metal. The golden rule of the AVM is every token in supply exists because somebody wanted it enough to buy it. Compare that to virtually anything else, at least in the modern history of markets. And companies can just print shares. Protocols can just print tokens. They have the button. All they have to do is file some paperwork, and then they get some more of it for free. That's just not the paradigm that this works in. It's a different style of value in market entirely. Every single token exists because somebody bought it. So when you say real value, there's no hidden supply. Well, there you go. That's why the supply is the supply that people bought.
And the uphill battle that we will face and are facing and will just be part of our growth phase is that people have a really hard time grasping that initially, right? They say, how can your protocol guarantee a certain minimum value? Because it's not normal for there not to be hidden supply team tokens that'll unlock in a few years. In all of those cases, a protocol could not know what a minimum value could be, or if there was a floor, it'd be like a penny, because good luck lifting the entire supply. And so when you have this thing that starts at $1 or starts at zero supply, It only exists because, like you said, someone chose to buy it. And therefore, you get a lot of interesting perks. When you do it this way, it comes with an incredible set of perks. The main one being that you can borrow interest-free, non-liquidatable loans against it, that anybody speculating on this pays a fee, trading fees, borrow fees, and those fees get redirected to everybody holding it partially, right? 25% at the start. And so you just have this very rewarding trading experience that amplifies exposure to the upside and caps the exposure to the downside. And we're seeing that right now with Solana. Somebody asked, actually, one of our OGs today in the chat was like, well, how is the multiple 11.76x, but the dollar value is 12.27? And it's like, well, that, sir, is because Solana has increased in value. And so it then occurred to them, it's like, wait a sec, if Solana was to say go up 5x against USD, and the NAV token was to outperform Solana by 4x, then anybody holding that NAV token, you see where I'm going with this, suddenly they've got 20x outperformance versus USD. And when they decide to ring the register and do whatever they would with that, they can borrow to exit, thereby unlocking capital efficiency, tax efficiencies, maintaining their long position too. They're still long on NAV, and any floor increases allow them to just continue to borrow more. So it's really incredible. We've talked about it at length. Everyone watching that's been around, you guys know what's here, what you can kind of expect. But for anyone who's new and watching, welcome. The paradigm starts here, and there's really, I think the other piece that excites me is like, look, we're an exchange. We have one listing, one asset, and we get to list hundreds across chains eventually. And so this very, very, very much is just the beginning. Second inning in the nirvana life cycle.
Would you go back to that price chart, please?
Yeah.
And oh yeah, you're on USD mode. Just to put some meat on the bones of what you said, there is a line. It's kind of hard to see, a third ghostly line underneath. That is the dollar value of Solana, just normalized to the left side of this chart. Like you look at relative performance of two assets. You anchor them somewhere and you see where they diverge from each other. It's lower than the floor. Solana has underperformed the floor price of this market. And that's not an accident. It's built in to how NAV tokens function, that the floor price will never underperform the underlying. In this case, the floor will never do worse than Solana itself. It's pulled away a little bit. It's outperformed it by, I don't know, maybe 50% in the last day, something like that. And it can just go up from there. Pick any time frame you want. The floor will always outperform the underlying. And that's not just Solana. It's any asset that becomes Samsarified has that property. This was in the works before digital asset treasury companies became at least a big thing in my mind. MicroStrategy's been around for a while, to be sure. That they had the similar goal in mind, which is how can we build something that's based off of a digital asset that just has this upward bias. They went at it their own way. This goes at it a different way. The merit of this approach to that goal is that it works by necessity. By necessity, the floor price will outperform the underlying, and unless in the extreme case where there's literally zero volume ever. But
like from day one, like not $1.
Yeah, from day one, literally zero. That's what it would take. Then it would just be at the price. It would do exactly the same thing. Yeah. So yeah, let's just say it necessarily outperforms the underlying. That's the point of all of this. The point of all of this is, like, as you said, if you are long Sol, if you believe in Sol, here's a way to amplify your returns without the usual pitfalls of amplification, those being you get liquidated, leverage cuts both ways, there might be a bankruptcy. It's a safe form of amplification, and you're also not beholden to stewards, custodians, boards of directors that make decisions on whether to issue preferred shares. It just does what it does mechanically, and it's a way to accumulate and grow in an asset that you're long. That's the purpose of Samsara on its own. And we're going to see that play out over and over again as new assets get listed. And then there's an ecosystem purpose for Samsara, which hooks back into the Nirvana mothership. And one of it is what you opened with, which is the revenue share mechanism to Nirvana's governance token adds value to Nirvana. And the fact that revenue from Samsara will be used to buy the Ana token all the live long day, that also adds value back to Nirvana.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick, because I know you're capped for time today. We have a lot going on, whitelist period ending soon, new launch coming up tomorrow. Like, there's a lot to do, even beyond what I just mentioned. So I want to make sure we get a few Q&As in. There is a lot of questions. Everyone's excited. And one of them that came up today is like, when buyback? Has that started? If not, when will it? I know it hasn't started, so I'm kind of leading you there. But to those who are curious, what is your mindset with regards to like how and when and what to expect? I know it's meant to be random, so it's not going to be algorithmic, therefore not something that can just be arbed and sniped. But yeah,
it's going to start tomorrow, and you're right that it cannot be. There has to be some random jitter in it. That's just the way public markets work. Otherwise, yes, it does. There is arbing and sniping that goes on, but that'll start flowing tomorrow. The only reason it hasn't right away is just because we're about 20 hours into a launch and the dust hasn't quite settled. But it's going to start tomorrow, and it'll just go forevermore. So when SOL gets produced as revenue on the Samsara market, some of that revenue goes to the Prana holders. Some of that revenue gets invested into the floor. That split is governable. And the remainder of that revenue gets rendered down to dollars, and that purchases Ana. And the same will happen for every other asset on Samsara. That's the point.
Yep. And we take that Ana, we stake it in our treasury, and we borrow USDC against it to fund everything we're doing, growth and operations. And in that sense, it's a hyper efficient buyback, because you don't have to say, hey, we're going to buy our token back and therefore give up the capital we might have had to grow. There's this kind of decision, right? And we saw this come up a lot in December. I think Jupiter founder went out and talked about it too. And just this debate of like, well, buybacks, they're not really having a positive impact on price, but they are definitely stifling our growth potential because we've put millions of dollars of cash into these buybacks. And I'm really excited to kind of model what it looks like when you use Ana as a buyback or as a treasury asset. You don't stop yourself from having access to dollars. In fact, you enhance you enhance your access to dollars over time.
Yeah. Two comments. First of all, the Ana token is very different in kind from most, if not all others, except for maybe Bitcoin, in that there was never like an airdrop, or there's never a mint, or give $10 million worth of it to an investor that unlocks a year from now. None of that stuff. That dead weight around most tokens has a lot to do with why buybacks don't really seem to move the needle. And then the second point is that the fact that Nirvana and Samsara and everything else that uses this engine lets you have a very capital efficient line of credit with no interest and no liquidation risk. And it means that you don't have to sell the token to unlock value, that we can have our cake and eat it too, as as a team that's growing this thing to buy the token and still be able to fund operations. You don't have to sell it. There's not a sell down the road in some undisclosed future event. The buy is permanent. It just gets bought, value gets added, liquidity gets added, and then you just borrow.
It's almost like it's burned supply. Effectively, it's not technically, right? Like the trigger price is not going to drop like it would if we burned the ANA. But it's effectively locked forever. It's a perpetual debt position that will grow over time. And I know a lot of people are already using the system that way as well. And the goal is to have other teams as well in the future do away with their plans to launch a token, which is frankly a nightmare in a lot of cases. And then you see company. I spoke to a team last week who's doing fantastic. $45 million in OTC and acquisition deals closed last year. And then after the call, I was like, oh, they have a token, don't they? And I went and looked, and it's like a 500K market cap, like down only for 4 years. And I was like, man, that hurts for their marketing. It hurts. People look at a token and say, oh, they're dead. And I spoke to them. They're like, no, like things are great. But you wouldn't know it. And so there's many such cases where you just don't need a token. And so the conversations I'm having with teams is like, hey, you don't need a token, but you could leverage ANA as a treasury asset and drive value to your community through Prana distributions, whatever you want. And when you have, say, Samsara revenue lifting the ANA market, and you have some of the launch pads that are building to us lifting the market with part of their revenues, and that just gets this kind of engine churning. And then we go out and talk to other teams, other DAOs, saying, hey, look at this fantastic treasury asset. Instead of sitting on your own island by yourself using whatever revenue you have to buy your own token with no access to real capital, you could join this alliance, buy this token. And every time any one of us lifts it and adds it to our treasury, everybody else sitting there holding it in their treasury gets a little more capital credit where they can borrow out. It's a really interesting dynamic that's never existed before. So I'm excited for that. And that's like a side quest. There's so many things we're doing on the BD front and growth front, but that's a really key one. And to really get that going, what better way to start that engine than by modeling it ourselves? And so that really kicked off in earnest yesterday. And as you said, tomorrow, the buybacks, the first ANA acquired by our treasury will be starting tomorrow, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
There's another question that came up, but I didn't have a good answer. And I'm going to ask you, there's a throttle on the fee to floor. And I did kind of talk briefly about the rationale for that. And I know we discussed it back and forth. Part of me wanted to see it, like the second the fee comes in, it goes into the floor. And you had a really good point about why it's actually better to sort of draw that process out, because floor going up is good. Floor going up feels good. It's a dopamine release. We like the floor going up. And so when you put a throttle on it and you say, okay, there's $59,000 yesterday in Solana, right? We're not talking about dollars really, but that's the equivalent. There's $59,000 worth of SOL that is slated to go into the floor. That is how much revenue to the floor is there. At what, how does that throttle work? Just take us through that a little bit. I ran out of specifics when I was chatting in the Discord yesterday, but everyone's curious.
The sensitivity to raising the floor from surplus revenue, ultimately it doesn't matter that much down to a couple orders of magnitude. The numbers are 0.1% every hour or something like that. I can't remember if it's 30 minutes or an hour, because the exact numbers don't really matter with this background radiation that's going into it. As to the question of does it need to be immediate, should everything go in right away? Well, you could, or you wouldn't. And how to formulate this? Samsara it's a treasury asset. It's the treasuryification of SOL, of Bitcoin, of ETH, of you name it. Treasuries grow. They grow over time. This isn't an instantaneous You buy a treasury, and it goes up 6% annual in 1 minute. It goes up 6% annual over a year. This isn't a flash in the pan. It goes up and then it has nowhere to go because it went up as much as it can. The growth ultimately comes from people wanting to long SOL, in this case, and purchasing it because it gives them all of these desirable features like the credit that you mentioned, or the pseudo leverage, the amplified returns. That's the killer feature. That's what it's about. The revenue just feeds into the floor as it feeds into the floor, and this revenue that's going into the floor is active even while the price is going down, even while the price is sideways. If revenue was accumulated in a massive explosion of interest over a couple hours, and then that interest stops, like maybe Kyle Samani and his Solana DAT company realizes this is actually a better vehicle to invest in SOL, and they just buy 10 billion in one clip, and you get a bunch of revenue. Wouldn't it be better that just ekes in over the next few months? So after that one buy, it's like pent up energy just going into the floor.
Yeah. No,
Not sure if that satisfies everybody's thoughts about this. That's it. You don't want to do everything at once. It grows as it grows.
and it's automated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is already happening. Some of that 30-day revenue to floor is already in the floor, and some of it is not. Most of it is not, and it's just going to trickle in. And I think you said, yeah, 0.1% of it max per half hour or hour, whatever that program is. And on a day like yesterday, I get it. There's excitement. It's like, whoa, everything's going up. Where's the floor? Look at all these fees. Where are they? And then there'll be days where there's maybe not a whole lot going on with one of these markets, and you'll just see this little trickle in the floor. And I think after we talked about this a few months ago, I really came around to it. I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. We want longer term motion in the floor over time, and then little spurts of energy just get stretched out. So one thing you mentioned that was interesting just now is you talked about, Somani and their forward industries. That kind of like, hey, there's a different, better vehicle. Um, Interesting fun fact I picked up last Friday. I spoke to a team in person that has just launched their own DAT on a TradFi exchange, and they're looking at this. They're taking a look at it. I have another follow up with them soon, because it's not one or the other, right? These DATCos are sitting on a lot of asset, and now that the excitement of launching has passed, their thinking is sort of turning towards, okay, what do we do with these assets? How can I take this Solana and get it active on chain? How can I take this token or the other and get it active on chain and generate a return or revenue? And so there's nothing stopping the DATs themselves through their TradFi vehicles taking the assets that they've accumulated and folding them through a Samsara market at some point in the future. So that's yet another vertical on the BD side that we'll be looking closely at, is giving them a place to put those assets to work. And the nice thing about Samsara is that it's not the end of your journey, right? If you go to a lending protocol and you put your asset out to lend it out, that's where it stops. If you go to an LP and you post that asset as an LP, that's where it stops. That's the thing you're doing. When you go and mint a NAV token, that is just the beginning. You now have exposure to that NAV token and access to credit of the underlying, which you can borrow out interest-free and non-liquidatable loan, and you can then take that and LP it or loop it somewhere else. So Samsara NAV tokens is really the beginning of an on-chain DeFi journey, whether it's an advanced user journey or just a vanilla holder journey, whatever that looks like. It is really just the starting point, and it's a fantastic starting point. To me, it's the bedrock of a spot long portfolio, because it gives you access to the asset to go do other stuff with while maintaining that long exposure in the market. Again, this is the kind of stories that we'll be telling, the resources we'll be putting together. And all of this gets infinitely easier now that it's live and it's real and you can touch it. Yeah. So,
yeah. I like to think about this as if you were there on the first day when somebody came up with the idea of call options. They're like, wait a second, we can make a derivative, based off of grain. We'll call it a future or something. It's hard to trade grain, but we'll trade these futures. How could they have anticipated all the interesting use cases other people would have figured out to do with that new derivative? That's what's going on here. The AVA, the AVM, these assets that have built-in liquidity, built-in floor prices, built-in credit. It's a new derivative. It still is SOL in this case. Owning it is owning SOL, just like owning an option for SOL is exposure to SOL. But it's a different kind of exposure, and it has a different kind of quality. It has different kinds of things you can do with it. Yeah. And what I like about this is that it's so crypto native, that an option, it has to be written by somebody. It's really still a human kind of thing, and you come up with expirations and you sign contracts. And this is just it's a machine. It's mechanical. It doesn't take any counterparty or third party to ensure that it works, but it is a derivative. It's a new kind. And yeah, you and I have been having some very, very exciting conversations with teams that are seeing things in this that our own imaginations could not achieve.
It's
Where
impossible.
this goes, we'll find out.
Yeah, it's impossible to fully imagine what will be built with these assets. Being a new primitive, it really just opens an ocean of opportunity and possibility. I'll tell you real quick, and this, some people that they're here to understand it and make it simpler. Well, let me give you an advanced, quick anecdote. I had a conversation last night with a team who's building an interoperability kind of brokerage layer between networks, and they're a trader, so they understand concepts of delta hedging and option strategies and all that. And when they looked at this and they said, so it sounds like if I bought this asset at the floor versus itself, it would have zero downside risk. So let's just say you pick up NAV SOL at the floor. Your SOL exposure is protected nearly 100%. Let's call it 1% off the floor because you got to lift it. And so you could take that NAV token and short the underlying, say in this case, Solana, and capture that funding. And in the case where the short prints, it's going down in value. You're short, so your NAV token is completely hedged. And in the case where it goes up, your NAV token is increasing in the same US dollar value because it's valued in this Solana without any downside risk versus Solana itself. And so you get to a point where you say, okay, what if this NAV token was deposited into an exchange as margin, and that exchange treated it the way that the AVM ensures? What you could do then is have these strategies where you essentially establish this risk-free delta hedged long short position where you're just printing on funding fees on the perps on the short side.
There you go.
In perpetuity. And so just say there's 100 of these assets listed. There's on Samsara, there's another exchange that accepts these NAV tokens as collateral. Somebody creates a bot that picks these up anytime they're within 1 or 2% of the floor, which they will be, right? Unlike ANA, where we still have this ongoing debate of it, will anyone ever sell at the floor? There's not a really rational reason to. But in the case of NAV SOL, if somebody's bearish on SOL, they don't want that SOL exposure, even if it's NAV SOL at the floor, they may sell into the floor. So there could be this exogenous bid in the market that's just a bot that's looking to pick up any of these assets somebody's willing to sell at the floor. Even if they think SOL's about to drop 80%, they'll pick it up at the floor because they're then quickly using it as margin to take a short against it. And so you have this sort of risk-free delta hedged funding, like one idea, a much more advanced idea, but already, another team thinking about this and thinking deep about how NAV tokens could be eventually used in margin positions, which is a really logical place for them to go because most margin, when volatile, is well, it's just that it presents its own set of risks. But when you have the AVM backed type assets like a NAV token, again, just one of many of the unimaginable things that will be baked around this at some point.
Ultimately, The mission was simple, to just store value. And I'm glad that this is working. That's what it does. That's what it does. People will have creative ways of interpreting the Rorschach test that they're looking at. They do this with Bitcoin. There's all sorts of weird and wonderful things that people have done with Bitcoin, or with gold for that matter. Samsara is saying you have these other assets that they're liquid. People love them. People use them. People believe in them. Here's a way to create value storage out of them without any of the downsides. You get the line of credit without liquidation risk. There's revenue that goes back to you. It's yield producing, natively, just from the revenue, and the liquidity is always going to be there. Exactly what it says it is. This is it's a good moment for Solana, and I expect this to be a lot of fun as assets can be amplified by this.
Yep. There's a strong flavor for what this is, and so right now the only gap is awareness and education, and that's me full throttle for the next ever in 6 to 12 months. Everything just gets easier when you have something to touch and feel, and even David was creating a tutorial yesterday, and then once the mainnet went live, he's like, you know what, I'm actually just going to do it now on mainnet because why not? So all the materials, all the resources, things like explainer videos, in many ways I wanted them months ago, and in some ways I'm really happy we didn't create them, because now we can create them with all the new bells and whistles, the features you've talked about in December. It makes sense to do it once and do it right and have a timeless asset, and that's what we're set up for now, which is fantastic. So I know you got to go. I can see the timer right on the screen. It's 12 minutes left until the whitelist ends. I imagine you'll want to be at the helm for that. Put another way, anyone who's watching who is not participated and who's not in that whitelist phase, we're 12 minutes away from this being public forever. So another monumental moment, just 24 hours after launch. But any final thoughts? I really don't want to keep you too close to that, because I know you're going to want to be in dev mode as we transition into public. Final thoughts for the road here today, and we'll be live again soon, so everyone can pick your brain at a more rested hour as well.
I'm looking forward to this being copied, bits of its DNA getting out into the wider ecosystem. Really, I want to change the mood that crypto has for the better, to return it back to its roots of being something that it's transparent, it's algorithmic, the rules of the game whenever you sit down. It just works. It just works. The reason Bitcoin's successful is that it's just a machine. It's just a machine that you could literally describe on a single piece of 8x11 paper, and that's it. And it just does what it does. Most of the edifice that was built up in so-called DeFi is more complicated and fraught and sometimes shadowy than I think is known. It has a different reputation than it deserves in reality. But finance, it can be algorithmic. It can be simple. You can create these primitives that run the way they do because they have to, because that's just how they are coded. That's what the floor price is. It just has to be there because 1 and 1 make 2. I'm hoping that this gets more builders, thinkers, founders, users to think a little bit differently about what you can do with these things called blockchains, what you can do to make systems that other users take part in, that aspires to a level of transparency and algorithmic purity. And you get some really cool upsides when you go down that path. There's all sorts of things that I hope that people copy. And the way that we do governance, I think is very valuable. I think it solves a lot of problems with the typical playbook that you see with like voting on each and every little thing, and I don't need to get into that. The burn and buy module is going to go live. Why didn't it go live at launch? I just don't want to do too many things at the same time. It'll transition into burn and buy, which I also think is going to. Well, I hope that it gets copied. I hope that it gets used, because I think it's very beneficial to the economics of governance tokens which are unbound, untethered. They're just minted. There's a whole lot of this that I hope some people find inspiration in to use to change the way they approach this game, and to make the entire crypto space just more aligned with the original founding ideas of crypto back in 2008. This is a step in that direction. I'm really happy to see people use it and understand it and think about it, and I appreciate that it can seem a little non-traditional, but I'll say to my dying breath, this is crypto conservatism. This is what crypto was supposed to be when it was first devised.
The dream is alive and well on the Nirvana front. And for those of you who are in here in the Discord, on Twitter, X, day to day, just telling the story, each person that you help understand this, we appreciate that. It's one of these things where at the beginning, everyone wants to know exactly how it works, right? This is so new, that's so wacky, that's so odd. It flies in the face of everything I thought I knew about how tokens work, about how value works. And so that we're in this phase right now where people really want to see behind the curtains and understand the depth of it. And so we need everybody. We need everybody in the community to be thinking in that lens and asking questions in the Discord. There's a lot of people in there, happy to answer them. And you get to a point eventually where it's like, oh, this is just a thing that works. Like nobody, before they buy their first Bitcoin, most people don't ask like, how's the Bitcoin blockchain work? Even for years, I didn't quite get it. Like I was on ETH so much, and then I went to go look through the blockchain explorer on Bitcoin. I was like, what's going on here? This is so complex. Thankfully, I don't have to know how it works. I just know that it does. Same with Solana, right? I love Solana. I use it every day. I don't know how to run a validator. I don't know the ins and outs of RPCs. But that's okay. I don't need to understand that. We're still in this early phase where everybody needs to know every little thing. And so for those of you who are helping on that front, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate that. And for those of you asking, I see some questions in here about the website that is going to get a fresh update today, links, some copy around coming soon versus live. When you go into a launch in software, and you can smile and nod along because you know how this goes, but there's a lot of moving parts. And what really critical to us yesterday is that we hit the mark on the launch moment. So shout out to you, Sid, for hitting that. And sometimes as you head towards that, certain things fall by the wayside. In this case, pushing that coming soon to like live now, not a big deal that it's taking an extra day versus like, missing the launch window yesterday. So for those of you wondering, that is happening today. Sid's going to go and make a couple updates there. And all other things, just hit us in the Discord. I see a lot of you posting quick bug reports, feedback, little things, really valuable stuff as well, pushing those directly to the GitHub for our devs to just keep hammering through. The work doesn't stop today. In fact, it probably just amplifies and gets more intense. We're live. So keep all that stuff coming, guys. The energy's been great. And thank you all for joining today. Thank you for coming to our TED Talk on Ashram Hours. We'll see you guys in the Discord and beyond. Take care, everybody.